What's up, everybody? This is Domingo here on Network, and today's wrestling video I'm going to be doing a discussion video, and I'm going to be talking about One Championship, a title that has been in the activity since 2001, and not to mention this championship is a very underrated championship, and I'm talking about the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship. So here we go. And of course, I just want to say this championship looks very nice. I actually love this design and the details of this championship. Of course, in the middle it says World Wrestling Federation. It's got the blue gloves. It's got the WWF logos on each side. It says Light Heavyweight on the top and the champion on the bottom. The WWF logo is on the top. Now, I will say this championship has a history, but like I said, this is one of the most underrated championships that not a lot of people talked about. I will say, not a lot of people have not talked about the WWF Lightweight Championship. It's almost like it's forgotten, and But anyway, now this championship was originally born on March 26, 1981, and this championship was deactivated on March 8, 2002. Now, in 1981, at the time, this championship, way before it was called the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship, it was known at the time was it used to be at the time with the UWA / New Japan Pro Wrestling, and it was known as the New Japan Pro Wrestling Light Heavyweight Championship at that time. Because I think around that time in the 80s, WWF and New Japan Pro Wrestling had a partnership. And yeah, that's actually true, guys. New Japan Pro Wrestling and the WWF in the late 1980s, they used to have a partnership together. Now this championship at the time when it was in UWA / New Japan Pro Wrestling, this championship has been defended in New Japan Pro Wrestling house shows at the time, and of course the first ever light heavyweight champion at that time in 1981 was Pedro Iguaio. Pedro Iguaio was the first ever light heavyweight champion at the time in New Japan Pro Wrestling / UWA on March 26, 1981, when he won a tournament and he defeated Gran Hamada in the finals to become the inaugural champion. And of course, he won that title in Shimizu, Japan. And of course, now I'm going to say that the names of the wrestlers who have held this championship. But before that, I will say the Light Heavyweight Championship is basically kind of like, it's basically like the Cruiserweights, but with a different name. Seeing the wrestlers, who's like under 200, I think around like 220 pounds at the time, 205 or 210, so under around that time. And these are the like high-flying, high-risk maneuver wrestlers who doing high-flying moves, that defy leads, like lucha libre style, Japanese styles, seeing all these high-fly moves, American style, seeing these high light heavyweights, flying out the ring and all that stuff. Like, back in the days, that's when it was good at the time, and it was pretty fun. Now, the wrestlers who have held this championship, I'm going to say the wrestlers who have held the light heavyweight championship in New Japan Pro Wrestling at the time: Pedro Iguaio, Fishman, Chris Adams, Gran Hamada, Valino III, who else? Rambo, Shangri Chinkana, Pegasus Kid, El Sando, Arrow Flash, The Great Sasuke, El Samurai, Ultimo Dragon, Jushin Thunder Liger, Shinjiro Ohtani. So those are the wrestlers that I mentioned that held this light heavyweight championship when it was in the UWA / New Japan Wrestling at the time. Now it was in UW. Now this championship has been in UWA / New Japan Pro Wrestling from 1981 to 1997. And of course, the man who held this championship for the most reigns, it was both Pedro Iguaio and Valino III. Now, these two wrestlers that I mentioned, they held the championship more times than any other wrestler in the New Japan Pro Wrestling, a record 7 times. The longest reigning light heavyweight champion, the wrestler who have been the longest reigning light heavyweight champion, goes to Pegasus Kid. Pegasus Kid, of course, later on became Chris Benoit, for those of you, because way before he was known as Chris Benoit, he was known in Japan as Pegasus Kid. Pegasus Kid was the longest reigning light heavyweight champion in Japan history, when he held the title for 560 days. Now, the wrestler who held this championship, who held it short, one of the shortest light heavyweight championship reign in New Japan Pro Wrestling, goes to Pedro Iguaio. He was the third ever light heavyweight champion. He held the title for 8 days. And of course, the last person who held this light heavyweight title in New Japan Pro Wrestling was Shinjiro Ohtani on November 5th, 1997, when this championship was deactivated, and he was the last wrestler to ever held the New Japan Pro Wrestling Light Heavyweight Championship. And then after that, the Light Heavyweight Championship went to the WWF after this title was deactivated in New Japan. I think around that time, maybe the WWF and New Japan partnership came to an end, and the Light Heavyweight Championship came to the WWF, and later on it was known as it was no longer the New Japan Pro Wrestling Light Heavyweight Championship. It was now known as the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship in 1997. So, on December 7, 1997, at D-Generation X in your house, Taka Michinoku defeated Brian Christopher in the finals of the Light Heavyweight Championship tournament, and defeated Brian Christopher to become the first ever WWF Light Heavyweight Championship. Now, Taka Michinoku was not the first ever light heavyweight champion overall, but he was the first ever light heavyweight champion under the WWF banner. Now, I said this earlier that the overall first ever light heavyweight champion was Pedro Iguaio, but in the WWF, they recognized Taka Michinoku as the first ever WWE Light Heavyweight Championship under the WWF banner. Now, around this time, when WWF first sprung this Light Heavyweight Championship to the company after the title was deactivated in New Japan and they brought it to the World Wrestling Federation, around that time, WWF decided to create their own version of the cruiserweights, which is called the Light Heavyweights. And the reason why they did that at the time was because they wanted to compete against WCW's Cruiserweight division. Because around that time, WCW's Cruiserweight division was amazing. It was so much fun. It was great. But unfortunately, that didn't work out, and it was a fail. Although I will say this. WWF, they tried, and they did the best they could, but come on, the WCW Cruiserweight division was always good. But I'm not gonna lie, the WWF, Light Heavyweight division, it was actually fun during its times, but it was so underrated, and the title has not defended that much in WWF banner, not that many times, but, it was they have some great Light Heavyweight matches and stuff. Now, the wrestlers I'm gonna say who held this title in the WWF, and the wrestlers who held this Light Heavyweight Championship was Taka Michinoku, Christian, Gilbert, S.A. Rios, Dean Malenko, Scotty Tahadi, Crash Holly, Jerry Lynn, Jeff Hardy, X-Pac, and Tajiri. Those wrestlers that I mentioned, they held this WWF Light Heavyweight Championship. Now, I did mention Taka Michinoku was the first ever WWF Light Heavyweight Championship. Now, the last wrestler who have held the WWE Light Heavyweight Championship was X-Pac. That happened in 2001 at SummerSlam when he defeated Tajiri in the title unification match, because X-Pac at the time was the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. And X-Pac was the first and only man to ever held the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship and the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. He defeated Billy Kidman on the episode Raw in the summer when he beat him in a title unification match, the first one, and X-Pac became the first ever man to ever held the Light Heavyweight title and Cruiserweight title twice. He did that twice. The first one was against Billy Kidman on Raw, and the second one was against Tajiri at SummerSlam 2001. Now, X-Pac was the final Light Heavyweight champion because at that time, now what happened at the time in 2001, X-Pac was the final wrestler to hold the title on October 9, 2001. Now, at that time, what happened was, at Survivor Series 2001, there was supposed to be a title unification match to unify the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship and the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. But what happened was, it was supposed to be X-Pac versus Tajiri at Survivor Series, because around that time, Tajiri did defeat Billy Kidman in October, around October, to become the WCW Cruiserweight Championship, and Tajiri was supposed to battle X-Pac to unify the WCW Cruiserweight Championship and the WWE Light Heavyweight Championship, but that match was canceled because X-Pac was injured during a house show at a house show in 2001, and that match was canceled because of X-Pac's injury. And X-Pac was the last light heavyweight champion, and the title was deactivated on March 8, 2002, and the light heavyweight championship was replaced with the WCW Cruiserweight Championship, which later became the WWF Cruiserweight Championship. After the Invasion storyline came to an end between the WWF versus WCW ECW alliance, the Cruiserweight Championship replaced the Light Heavyweight Championship, and it was no longer the Light Heavyweight division of WWF. It was known as the WCW. It was known as the WWF Cruiserweight division and the Cruiserweight Championship, and then later on became WWE Cruiserweight Championship. So yes, and of course, as far as who was the longest reigning WWF Light Heavyweight Championship under the WWE banner, the first man who held the title longer was Gilbert. Gilbert, who was the parry to Goldberg, he was the #1 longest reigning WWF Light Heavyweight Champion in history when he held the title for 448 days, but WWE recognized his reign at 445. Dean Malenko became the second man to ever held the WWE longest reigning Light Heavyweight Champion in history when he held the title for 322 days, but WWE recognized his reign at 321. X-Pac became the third man to become the longest reigning Light Heavyweight Champion, WWF Light Heavyweight Champion in history when he held the title for 201 days. And as far as the shortest Light Heavyweight Championship reign, that goes for Scotty 2 Hotty. Scotty 2 Hotty held the WWE Light Heavyweight Championship for 8 days, but WWE recognized his reign at 9. And of course, the title, like I said earlier, was deactivated in 2002, but in 2002, and of course it was replaced by the Cruiserweight division because the Light Heavyweight Championship, it was pretty good, good championship, but they had some pretty good Light Heavyweight matches back in the days. But WWE tried to compete with WCW's Cruiserweight division, but it failed, and to the point, I guess that might be one of the reasons why the Light Heavyweight Championship was deactivated and replaced with the Cruiserweight Championship, and it was known as the WWF/WWE Cruiserweight Championship division at the time. So that's it for this video, guys. So don't forget to like this video, share, subscribe, post your comments in the comment section. We'll tell you what you think about the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship. And that's it for this video, guys. For this is Domingo Hero Network. All I can say is take care. Have a good day. Goodbye, everyone. Domingo Hero Network is signing out. Peace.